You know, loneliness, it's not just a feeling you get on a quiet night. It's actually a biological threat. Think of it like an ancient alarm system in your body that can be just as damaging to your health as some of the biggest risks we all know about. Okay, let's dive into exactly how this works. So, get this. What if I told you that lacking social connection could raise your risk of premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day? And no, I'm not exaggerating. That's what major research is telling us. It's a pretty staggering thought, and it completely changes how we should think about loneliness, moving it from just a mood to a really serious health issue. And the numbers really back this up. I mean, look at this. Having poor social relationships is tied to a 29% higher risk of heart disease and a 32% higher risk of stroke. We're not just talking about a coincidence here. We're talking about deep physiological changes happening inside the body. So this brings us to the big question, right? How can something that feels so personal, so subjective, this feeling of being alone, actually set off such a dangerous chain reaction in our bodies? Well, the answer, it turns out, is written deep inside our evolutionary code. To really get this, we have to go way back to our roots as a species. Because for as long as we've been around, our survival has hinged on our ability to connect and work together. Now, real quick, it's super important to get our terms straight because they're not the same thing at all. Okay, so social isolation is the objective reality of having few social contacts. It's a numbers game. But loneliness, that's the subjective feeling that your social needs aren't being met. You could be in a crowded room and feel deeply lonely. It's that feeling that we're focusing on today. For literally thousands of years, being part of a group meant you survived. It meant sharing food, protecting each other from danger, raising kids together. We are, as scientists call us, the ultra-social animal. For social smarts, our brains aren't just comfortable in groups. They're fundamentally hardwired for it. There's actually a brilliant framework for this called social baseline theory for strategists. And the core idea is pretty simple. Your brain's default setting, its baseline, is to expect to be connected with others. When you're with people you trust, your brain can kind of relax. It conserves energy because it knows it can share the load, whether that's watching for threats or solving a problem. It's the brain's most energy-efficient way to operate. But the moment your brain senses you've drifted from that social baseline, the moment it perceives you're alone, it treats it like a critical vulnerability. An alarm goes off, and it literally declares a state of emergency. So what does this state of emergency actually do to your body? This is where the feeling starts to get very, very physical. That emergency signal immediately activates something called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so we'll just call it the HPA axis. Basically, this is your body's central command center for stress. It's the exact same system that lights up if you're, say, face-to-face with a bear. But here's the real problem. With chronic loneliness, that HPA axis doesn't just switch on and then off again. It gets stuck in the on position. A great way to think about it is like a fire alarm that just will not stop blaring, constantly flooding your entire system with the stress hormone cortisol. And the downstream effect of all that cortisol? Chronic inflammation. Now, this is the part that might just blow your mind. Research has found that the feeling of being isolated can increase inflammation to the exact same degree as living a completely sedentary lifestyle. For explorers, let that sink in. That feeling of being alone can have the same physical impact as never exercising at all. But the body's emergency plan doesn't just stop with stress and inflammation. Nope. There's another really surprising consequence that almost no one ever talks about. Let's explore this really fascinating study that uncovered a hidden pattern. Scientists started looking at the connection between feeling lonely and a hormone called ghrelin. You might have heard of it. It's often called the hunger hormone. It's what your body releases to tell your brain, hey, it's time to eat. So what they found was pretty remarkable. Among a group of non-obese women, the ones who reported feeling lonelier, well, they had a much bigger spike in that hunger hormone after they had finished a meal. So even though they had just eaten, their bodies were literally screaming for more food, making them feel hungrier. So why on earth would that happen? Well, the evolutionary logic here is actually pretty powerful. For most of human history, eating wasn't just about fuel. It was a deeply social event for social smarts. Sharing a meal was about safety, it was about community, it was about connection. Our brains literally learned to equate food with getting back to that safe social baseline. So when we feel disconnected, our brain might be hitting the hunger button as an ancient, hardwired attempt to seek out the connection that so often comes with a meal. Okay, so we've got a constant stress response, we've got chronic inflammation, and we even have our appetite getting all out of whack. When you start putting all these pieces together, you can see how loneliness creates this powerful, self perpetuating cycle. Let's walk through this simple framework for strategists. It all starts with the feeling of loneliness. That kicks off the chronic stress and inflammation we talked about. That constant state of high alert, well, it drains you, physically and mentally, leading to fatigue and a low mood. And of course, when you're exhausted and feeling down, you have way less energy to reach out and connect with people, which just leads to deeper isolation. The biology of loneliness actually makes it harder to stop being lonely. And it is so, so important to hear this next part. This is not a personal failing. It's not some kind of character flaw or a sign you're unlikable. It's a biological trap. The very systems designed to protect you in a short-term crisis can end up locking you into a long-term cycle. But here's the good news. Just by understanding the mechanics of this trap, by seeing it for what it is, a physiological process, you've already started to disarm it. That knowledge transforms the problem from some huge, overwhelming feeling into a system you can actually understand and work with. So, if you take nothing else away from this, let's just quickly recap the three biggest takeaways. One, social connection isn't a nice to have. It's a fundamental biological need, just like food and water. Two, that feeling of loneliness triggers a very real, very physical state of emergency in your body. And three, this whole response can create a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle that actually traps you in more isolation. Which kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. Our brains are basically running ancient software that was designed for tight-knit, face-to-face village life. So how is that ancient wiring supposed to handle our modern world of social media, remote work, and giant anonymous cities? That's a question for all of us to think about.
If this touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family. Save this for more meaningful content ahead.